Hey everyone, how's it going? My name's Jess. Welcome back to my knitting channel. Okay, today I'm super excited. I'm going to be doing a step-by-step video tutorial on how to knit this blanket, this garter stitch intarsia blanket. I made this when I was pregnant with my baby, and I've actually made one recently for my friend who's pregnant. So this is the one that I made for my friend. It's slightly different because instead of doing 5 squares, I've done 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Just because I just felt like something a little bit different. It's just a little bit smaller. But I've done exactly the same stitch count, ribbing, same amount of squares going horizontal, just not the same amount going vertical. It's a super simple blanket. It doesn't really take long at all. It only took me a few days. And all you need for this is probably, I would say, because I use all my scrap yarn, it's kind of hard to give you exact amounts of yarn that you need. But for the sort of main color that is for the ribbing, both ribbing, I would say 3 balls of like Crazy Sexy wool, any kind of super bulky wool. There's lots of different brands out there that you can choose from. That's just what I had on hand. Actually, the peach from this one is from We Are Knitters, but the lilac and the pink and red is all from Wool and the Gang. So I would say, yeah, 3 balls for the main color and then 2 balls for the secondary color. So the one that doesn't have isn't in the ribbing. And you just need a pair of 12mm, I would say circular needles, because if I don't know how you would fit it on straight unless they're like giant, but I always use circular needles for everything. I think it's just a lot more easier on your wrist. So yeah, I recommend 12mm circular needles. You don't need any other type of needles, and you will need to have a tapestry needle for weaving in all the ends. So the blanket is all garter stitch, which I love. So there's no pearls in this section, but there is purling obviously in the ribbing. I know purling seems to be not that popular. I mean, I personally don't mind purling, but I know it's not that popular in amongst knitters. So I'll go through how to do the intarsia technique for this blanket, but it's actually really simple. If you can knit and purl, then you're good to go. This will be an easy project for you. If you are knitting it for a baby, then obviously this is not something that you're going to leave in like a cot or a bassinet because it's super heavy. It's not safe. So I would only ever use this if I was going out on pram walks, because then obviously I can see my baby. But yeah, definitely don't use it in a cot or a bassinet because it's super heavy and super hot. So as I said, the one that I made for my daughter has got 5 squares going down, and the one that I made for my friend has 4 squares going down. So whichever one you prefer, it's essentially, you're just going to be adding on like an extra sort of rows across. So yeah, grab your 12mm needles, your balls of scrap bulky yarn, super bulky, and yeah, we'll get knitting. Also, apologies, halfway through filming this, I realized YouTube is filmed all horizontal. I'm not used to that. I'm used to Instagram and TikTok. So sort of like half of this video for the tutorial is gonna have like the black rectangles on the side. And then towards the end, I realized and flipped it around, and yeah, I just wanted to let you know. But it's essentially the same information. It just doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing. All right, let's get knitting. The main colour that I'm using is salmon from We Are Knitters in the wool, but I tend to call it peach in this video. With 12mm needles, cast on 56 stitches using the long tail cast on method. Feel free to use whichever cast on method you prefer. I just like this cast on method as it gives a nice stretchy edge. I recommend not using the knit cast on method as I don't feel like it gives a neat edge. Once you've cast on 56 stitches, you can see that this is the right side as it has a nice clean edge, whereas the wrong side has a more bumpy edge. You will now begin knitting the rib. So this is knit 1, purl 1 for the entire row. A reminder that this needs to be 56 stitches. Work in 1 by 1 rib for 7 rows. You may like to pause the video, work on your 7 rows and come back for the next section. This is how 7 rows of ribbing looks, and you can see that we now have that right side with the clean edging, and now you begin the colour work. The main colour, which I will call colour A, is the peach colour from We Are Knitters The Wool, and the lilac is Lilac Powder Crazy Sexy Wool from Wool and the Gang. You will begin the first square by using the yarn that you've already been using for the ribbing, and you will knit across 8 stitches in colour A. Once you have knit across 8 stitches in colour A, you will grab a thread of colour B and you will pop colour B, so in this case lilac, underneath the peach. So it is the new colour underneath the old colour, and this will avoid making a hole. Firstly, knit a couple of stitches in the new colour. Once you've knitted a couple of stitches, I then like to secure the yarn just by tying a knot at the back. Knit a total of 8 stitches going across in colour B, so the lilac, and you will repeat this 8 stitches for each square, so colour A, 8 stitches, colour B, 8 stitches, and then you're going to repeat that pattern. And in total you will have 7 squares going across, and each of those squares will be 8 stitches wide. I am now up to adding in another colour A because I've done 8 stitches. So again, that new colour is going underneath the old colour, so we've got that peach underneath the lilac. I'm going to knit a couple of stitches and then I'm going to secure it by tying a knot at the back. So please remember to put the new yarn underneath the old yarn, and this will avoid holes. I've finished my 8 stitches of the peach colour, so I'm now going to add in another lilac square. So again, the new colour underneath the old colour and then knitting across for 8 stitches. I've knitted across 8 stitches in lilac, so I'm now adding in 8 stitches of peach. So again, the new colour underneath the old colour. I just keep repeating it so you know to do it because I've had it before. You knit across and then you end up with heaps of holes, so just remember that. Again, starting a new square, so I'm adding in lilac, colour B. I will, as like every other square, knit across 8 stitches. So if you can think about the equation there's going to be 7 squares and each square is going to have 8 stitches. 7 eighths are 56, so that's why you've cast on 56 stitches. One more final square to complete the first row, so that will be colour A, the peach, and as always you're going to be knitting across 8 stitches. So after this first row you should have 4 squares of colour A, peach, and 3 squares of colour B, lilac. The back of your work will probably look like a mess, like mine does right now, and you'll notice that the strands of yarn are on the front of the work, rather than when we were working before, they were at the back of the work. So the intarsia technique is just a little bit different on this side. So you will knit across again, so 8 stitches, and we're starting with the colour A in peach. And once you have knit your 8 stitches in colour A, the peach, you are going to bring that yarn to the front of your work, And with your lilac colour B, which is the next colour that you're up to, you're going to be putting that strand underneath the peach strand, as you can see here. So again, the new colour is going underneath the old colour, but you're bringing that old yarn to the front and the new colour to the back. And it's always good to give a gentle pull on the working yarns, as I feel that it gives a good tension. So once I've finished knitting my 8 stitches, I'm going to incorporate my new colour. So again, I'm going to bring that old colour to the front, and the new colour is going to go underneath the old yarn, and then I'm going to knit across 8 stitches again. So remember that the whole blanket is knit stitch apart from the ribbing, so there's no purls, so it's garter stitch. And you will repeat this process for the entire row, making sure that each square is 8 stitches, and it will end up looking like this. So I've neatened up the ball so it gives you a better idea of how it should look. So we're now up to a row 3, which is a right side, and the working yarns will be at the back of your work, and you will just do exactly the same as you did with row 1, so 8 stitches for each square. So you're going to continue this pattern working back and forth for 16 rows in total. So each square will have 8 stitches and there will be 16 rows worth. And this is how it ends up when you've knitted 16 rows for each square. And remember, 4 squares of peach, colour A, and 3 squares of colour B in the lilac. And there are 8 stitches for each square. And this is how it looks on the back. So you can imagine how many ends there's going to be to weave in. So once you've knitted 16 rows for each square, you are then going to start a new panel. When starting a new row with a new colour, I like to put the new yarn underneath the old yarn to keep it secure. In this instance, we are now going to start a new panel, so the first square is going to be lilac. And once you've finished knitting your 8 stitches of lilac, you're then going to do 8 stitches of peach, 8 stitches of lilac, 8 stitches of peach, and you're going to do that across for the whole row. So it's basically just the opposite of what you just did. And you're going to do this again for 16 rows. So once you've completed this second panel, you will end up with 4 squares of lilac and 3 squares of peach. So it's going to be the opposite of the first panel. And always remember that you're doing 16 rows for each square, and each square has 8 stitches. So you might like to pause this video, work on your second panel, and then we'll come back and have a look and see how it's going. And keep in mind that when you are working the squares, that for the right sides, all the working yarns are at the back, and for the wrong sides, you're going to have those yarns that are coming at the front, and then you'll need to place the working yarn at the back. So now that you have the basic pattern explained, I'm not going to go through every square as it will take hours. So I want you to continue working until you've got 4 squares going lengthwise, or you might like to do 5 squares going lengthwise. The squares across are not going to change. There's always going to be those 7 squares. So with this blanket here, I've done 4 squares going lengthwise. And once you've done those at least 4 squares going lengthwise, or 5, what you're going to do is grab your colour A, so for me it's peach, and you're just going to knit across 1 row in knit stitch with the same colour. So you won't be changing colours, you're just going to knit across the whole row, so 56 stitches in colour A. And the reason I like to do this one plain row in colour A is when I originally just went straight to doing the ribbing, it kind of gave this strange coloured effect with the lilac. It just didn't look neat. I found just doing one plain row of knit stitch across just made it look a lot neater. Up to you though, if you don't want to do this one plain row, then you don't need to, but I've just personally find it much neater. And each time you come up to a different square, make sure that you're putting that new yarn underneath the old yarn. but it's just going to stay that same color all the way across. So a bit of a nice change for you. So once you've knit across those 56 stitches, this is how the back of your blanket should look. You only have that one working yarn now, which is kind of a relief. And you're now going to begin your rib. So you're going to do knit one, purl one for the entire row, and you're just going to do this in that color A, so the peach, the one color. So it's kind of a breather because now you're just up to the one color and it just feels a lot easier. And you're going to do this for 7 rows of rib, just the same as what you did at the start. So this is how it looks once you've done your one plain row of knit stitch and 1 row of rib. So just continue until you've completed 7 rows of rib in that color A. So you're now up to casting off. So you'll just be doing casting off in rib stitch. So that's just knit 1, purl 1, and then passing the stitch over the needle. So this is just like casting off in knit stitch, but you're doing, you know, knit 1, purl 1, and it gives a nice stretchy edge as well. So you'll cast off the entire row in rib stitch, and then we'll have a look and see how that back looks. So this is how that cast off looks for the ribbing, so it gives a nice neat stretchy edge. And now let's have a look at that back. So as you can see, there's quite a few ends to weave in. I personally don't mind weaving them in. I feel like it's pretty relaxing. So I'm going to weave these in and then we'll come back and see how that looks. So like magic, I've weaved them in and I'll just have one thread to show you, because imagine how long it would take if I showed you me weaving in all these ends. So using a tapestry needle, I like to go back and forth through a few stitches just to make sure that it's really secure, and I just go along the square edge. I go along the square edges rather than in the middle of the squares, just because I feel like it's not going to show up on the front of the work, but that's just me personally. Weave them in however you please, just know that there's going to be quite a few to weave in, and once you've weaved in those ends, I just snip back that tail a little bit just so it's not sticking out as much. And once you've weaved in the ends, your blanket is finished. The only other thing that you should do, and I'm not saying you have to do, is to block it. But how pretty is this color combination? So lilac and peach. I'm loving it. So your blanket's now done. Please stick around for a really short outro. I'll make it as quick as possible. So hopefully if you've come this far, it means you've made your own checkerboard blanket. I have now blocked mine and I think it's really come up a treat. I'm super happy with this. I love pink and red. I think it's the best combo. I can't think of a better combo than that. I can't show you my friends anymore because I've given it to her. I blocked hers as well, so I do recommend blocking it, but I understand if you can't be bothered. It does take a while to dry. This is still slightly damp. But if you do make one, please let me know. Find me on Instagram, and you can, if you upload a picture, please tag me or send me a picture. My handle is @the.unraveler on Instagram and the Unraveler on TikTok. I would love to see them. I think this would also look great as like a little throw rug on like a couch or a bed. It's what I'm going to use it for once, you know, my baby's older and she's no longer in her pram. But yeah, it's definitely not just a baby blanket. It can be a blanket just for yourself. And if you are using it as a baby blanket, as I said, don't put it in the cot or bassinet. I only recommend going on pram walks with this blanket where you can see your baby. So please let me know if you've made one. If you have any comments or questions, please pop them in the comments section. This is my first ever tutorial, so, you know, it's probably not great, but yeah, happy to take any kind of feedback. If I've made something sound super confusing, which it's highly likely, yeah, just put it in the comments and I will get back to you if you have any questions. And I hope you all have a ripper day.